Thank you.
Welcome to the epicenter of sports and entertainment. This is The Rude Dog Show. Now, here's your host, Rudy Reyes.
Welcome to The Rude Dog Show. Good afternoon, everybody. This is Rudy Reyes. I am live on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn. Today's Canada, today's California. And, of course, you can always go to TheRudeDogShow.com and check this wonderful show. And it couldn't get any more wonderful than the guest here I'm about to bring on to the show, Mr. Randy Cross, three-time Super Bowl champion of the San Francisco 49ers, who probably has been keeping a bird's eye watch on Cap. And we were having a little sidebar on the cap issues and some of the teams that are, I don't know, finding their way under the cap. Maybe you'd stated they had different calculators.
Yeah, well, it seemed ever since there's been a salary cap, there have been front offices that just do math different. Some use calculators, some use abacus, some do the old rat hole the money and just say, I'm going to pretend that's not even there, and I'll use that later.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting to see guys. We were talking about Mickey Loomis and the Saints and how they managed to get under the cap. At least at this juncture, it looks like they will get under the cap because Mickey does this every year, year after year after year for New Orleans, where he ends up starting on the high and then ends up getting on the low and just barely getting by, but enough to have a 53-man roster now signing Derek Carr for a 40-year deal there in New Orleans, which I think is going to be not only a change of scenery, but we're not going to know whether or not he's going to be that guy moving forward. I know they signed him a 4-year deal, but Derek Carr, I've seen him play way too many times, whether it's in Oakland or in Las Vegas. And I'll be honest with you, I've seen the same Derek Carr, not like the Derek Carr in college, of course, connecting with Devontae Adams in the end zone quite a bit in their Fresno State days, which happens to be the city I'm in. But I don't know if he's going to have the same success or maybe better success. What does New Orleans have that maybe the Las Vegas Raiders don't in the way of protection, or maybe just overall from an organizational standpoint that makes Derek Carr a winner in New Orleans?
Well, you mentioned Mickey Loomis. That doesn't hurt. He's got some pretty good talent around him. Probably a little bit better talent than he had at Vegas. You know, it's kind of when Jimmy G went there to the Raiders. I think a lot of people, you had to kind of look at it and go, man, that could be rough. Because if they're going to beat up Derek Carr, they're going to probably beat up Jimmy G too. I don't know. I think New Orleans has got talent that's just a little bit better, honestly, on paper. But, you know, how is he going to play? Is he going to sort of rediscover that spark, that magic? You know, those that have watched him now for how many years he's been in the league would say, 6, 7 years?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, maybe not. No, probably not.
Well, I don't know that he's going to have the type of protection up front that he had, obviously, in college. Raiders, he had some, not the best, but guys like Drew Brees managed to do a lot under the very similar type of offensive blocking and protection up front. He's done it. He's done it, but in postseason play, he's 0-1. So Derek Carr could be what we all thought he could be, which is a star. Is this a place where he can actually relive and reinvigorate his career in New Orleans versus the tumultuous situations with multiple coaches in a carousel coaching situation there, as he's going to find in New Orleans where there's only one coach?
Well, you know, he also gets himself in a little bit more user-friendly division. Tampa, you know, speaking of cap, you know, they're an incredible amount over the cap. And you got, Atlanta is kind of to say they're in flux as being nice. Carolina is definitely, you know, not a huge challenge. So he's stepping into a much better situation than, you know, trying to stand toe to toe with the Chiefs and the Chargers.
Yeah, he has a much much better chance. And I know Carolina is on the rise, but between that deal that the Bears had sent over and vice versa, they were giving and taking a little bit. I think the Bears got the better end of the deal, to be perfectly honest with you, because they get to trade down, they get to bolster their 53-man roster. They're going to have a few rookies. Fields finally gets some help downfield where he only had one or two options every single game, including himself being able to run when the pocket presents itself, which did happen a whole lot last year. I know his rookie year it did, but a lot of things are going to get better for the Chicago Bears and Ryan Poles, who just seems to be pulling rabbits out of his hat. They have the most cap in the NFL. I don't even know how that happened.
Yeah, I think it's going to be fun to watch and see what they do from the toys standpoint, because they've got still have some pretty good draft picks. And I think you look at what they could do, could they do a little Buckeye reunion for Fields, getting in Jigbo there or whoever. It's not an easy place to play. That's, in that division, Green Bay is the only one that kind of lives outdoors and has thrived, in those conditions. Chicago and Fields he's got some stuff to prove without a doubt. I know there's some people that aren't huge fans of Justin Fields that, he was running. There's a reason he gained so many yards rushing. A, he could do it, and B, he had to. So, I think you start getting a situation where you get him more toys, it'll be a much more user-friendly offense for Fields.
I think user-friendly is probably going to be a little bit more likely in Chicago than it is right now with the, again, ×2. And I'm over it, Randy. I'm so over it right now between Aaron Rodgers not making up his mind. Is he coming? Is he going? He's in darkness. He's in the light. I'm over it. His inability to make a decision and understand what an inoculation is versus a vaccination certainly boggles the mind. The Jets have been in contact with Aaron Rodgers within the last 24 hours. I know there's a ticker somewhere. Somebody has it on their Twitter line. I don't know who it is, and frankly, I don't really care. But I will ask you this. Does Aaron Rodgers, if he leaves Packerland, is this going to be another situation if he goes to New York, let's say? Is he going to be able to bolster this roster? Because don't forget, he didn't practice with the rookies last season or the season before that in order to build continuity. And of all people, that you have to build continuity in order to take that into the regular season in order to be successful.
It's also incumbent upon an organization and a coaching staff to give him guys that at least know the offense. That was an issue last year. He has created a lot of his own problems. Let's put it that way. I think from a PR standpoint, but he was just recently a back-to-back MVP, so it's not like he's kind of forgotten how to play. He can throw the devil out of the ball. He really can, and I think he's going into a situation that's better than it was at Green Bay from the standpoint on the offensive side with the guys he's going to be throwing the ball to. And they're not done adding there too, because you guarantee if they make that signing, they got Lazard today, right? Was that final?
I don't think that's final yet. I have yet to see anything finalized. No.
Yeah, that'll be good for him. He'll enjoy that, getting a familiar face. But
not only that, but Randall Cobb is a guy as well who will find his way to New York if for some reason Aaron Rodgers decides to leave and land.
Aaron Rodgers, though, Rudy, he can throw the ball. He is going to still be just fine. They're not. Let's put it this way: they're not getting an ex-Green Bay Packer quarterback quite like it was with Favre when Favre went there. It's not far off, but it's not quite the same thing because Rodgers proved last year he can still play this game at a pretty high level, and it'll be fun to see how he interacts. It's going to be a definite, look up the term love-hate relationship, because that's going to be him and the media in New York.
Yeah, that media out there is scrutinous. They will tear you apart. One day they love you, the next day they wish you were in a garbage disposal. I mean, it's
Yeah.
just that bad. It
Yeah.
really
And they
is
can and
that bad.
they can make both happen too.
Well, they could. It depends on his performance. It depends on his play, and it depends on what his interactions are with not only the media, right? Because we know that if you go to New York, you're going to be facing the sacrificial lamb, or you could be it. And all it takes is a tag
Yeah.
to make
Well,
you that guy.
it'll be really fun to see Rudy if they make this deal and they fully commit to him. I got to think part of this fully committed to him is the reciprocal part of that, and that's him being fully committed to them. Be it the off-season workouts, just working out in general in the facility and being around the football team. He's going to be learning a new offense. Football's not new for him, but it's still going to be a new experience for him. He's got an advantage of, if he does go there, of having Nathaniel Hackett, and he's familiar with him and his terminology and what he likes to do. So,
Well, I want to see if he does land in New York, he has probably the easier slate, to be perfectly honest with you. Because you look at New England, they have, I don't want to say a question at quarterback because Mac Jones is still pretty good. He's still in the last year of his rookie deal. So he has some of the weapons. They did lose Jacoby Myers to the Raiders. So it would make sense that their needs are now a wide receiver. They need a defensive back, and they also need a guard to protect Mac Jones's weak side. My question is what team other than the Bills is he going to have to contend with? That's the Dolphins. And I think the Dolphins are on the rise because they just acquired Raheem Mostert, now his third stint in Miami, which
yeah.
now leaves the 49ers without a guy as dynamic as him. Not to suggest that he's the answer, no, but he was very durable. He does have an injury history, so that's obviously of concern. What did the 49ers lose when they lost Mostert?
They lost. Kyle loves to have three. He'd like to have four, but he's got to have at least three running backs. He'll be fine. He'll find other guys, whether it's in the draft or free agency, that people that can fill a role. So it's going to hurt not having Mostert. I liked his pop. I like his just out of the hole, the way he can run, and his quickness. But I think a lot of that is made by the offensive line too. I mean, that's been a pretty damn good run blocking offensive line. They've had some issues pass protection wise, but they can definitely run the ball in San Francisco. And he won't miss that per se because Miami's pretty well stocked up too. But I think they're going to be fine.
Well, they also lose McGlinchey. Now, I know McGlinchey, again, not the best or not the most athletic guy, but he's a big body. And progressively, he's shown glimpses of greatness on that offensive line. And what's going to be interesting to see who starts under center. We'll talk about that in a minute. But do they go into the draft? Do they find the next man up to take McGlinchey's spot?
I would think on the roster, I'm drawing a blank on the kid's name that started for him when he was hurt earlier in the year. But I would think, and they have done this every year, they will draft linemen. You're going to see, and you saw all those draft picks they got. They got what, 7 supplemental picks. And those, especially when you get in that 98, 99, 100, 101 right in there, that is prime time O-line stuff right there. And I would look for at least one of those third-round picks to be an offensive lineman. And that high, it's going to be a pretty good lineman. But they've also got excellent coaches, and their guys play to their scheme, and they're drafted to their scheme, which I think it gives the Niners, it gives Lynch, and it gives Shanahan an advantage.
It definitely does. I think Trent Williams played really, really well last year, regardless of who was under center, which kind of leads me to the obligatory Brock Purdy is scheduled to have surgery on that inflamed elbow. Um, One has to question. I understand Trey Lance still under contract.
Mm-hmm.
It was the season of broken ankles, and I don't mean an NBA broken ankle. I mean an actual literal broken ankle or high ankle sprain. I mean a combination of either one is not fun.
Yeah.
But with the loss of Brock Purdy, at least until training camp, hopefully, fingers crossed and toes crossed, if you can do both at the same time. Uh, I don't know who they're going to get if Trey Lance is not ready or Brock Purdy is not ready. Do they go in the 6th round and pick up a quarterback?
That's possible. I wouldn't say it's impossible. Signing Sam Darnold gives them somebody they know, gives them somebody that can throw during training camp and can start a couple of preseason games if you have to. Is he going to be at any time going to be your starter? I'd say no. You're not planning to do that. But you'll see them sign another quarterback or two, if not draft one. And they, let's be honest, they got pretty lucky. That irrelevant pick, the history of that being a blockbuster player is pretty thin. So, Purdy played really well. It's real important that he has a great rehab, has a great surgery result, and gets going. Trey Lance, at least initially from a competition standpoint, there's not going to be much competition. He's going to be healthier and have a little bit of an edge to start with.
Yeah. The problem that I have with Trey Lance out of NDSU, he didn't get a lot of college playing time. That concerns me. And I know that Shanahan doesn't really have a ton of faith in Trey Lance. To be honest with you, he'd be on a short leash if I was Shanahan, to be quite honest with you,
Yeah.
because of the lack of experience at the college level, which translates into the NFL. I've seen him stumble quite a bit in his starting games, named the starter last year. I know Jimmy G signed on a 1-year deal just to stay with the team. And then that ankle occurred on Trey Lance, then another ankle for Jimmy Garoppolo. I don't know that Trey Lance is still the capable guy of being the starter. And I know there'll be competition. There better be. If Shanahan's like any head coach in the NFL, he knows how to put competition in the way to either force you to do your best or expose your weaknesses.
Yeah. Well, I mean, let's be realistic. Trey Lance is the star of your draft again this year because of that deal you made. That you'll be, and if you didn't like it, you're going to love it come April and May because you're going to hear about that thing a lot. He's very inexperienced. He's very dynamic. The one thing that Purdy showed he can do so well is running to pass. And most young quarterbacks, it doesn't translate over from your college experience to the pro experience, the defenses and whatnot. The adjustment's not quite like what you saw from Brock Purdy. And that's something that Trey Lance, he can run. But the problem is, can you run to pass? Can you buy time with your feet and have your receivers react to you? Now, I think it's something he'll be able to work on this offseason, work on it in the preseason. He is significantly ahead from a rehab standpoint, I would imagine. So he'll have that advantage. And you don't really know because what's he had since high school? 20 games? Starts-wise?
Yeah.
So, he's the definition of potential. As of right now, he might be going into his third year in the NFL, but he's still potential.
Well, I personally, I'm here in Central Valley, California. So obviously 49ers are a huge market, huge ticket, always on TV. And one thing that I really enjoyed about watching Brock Purdy was his ability to get rid of that ball when it was needed the most. When the pressure was up front, he only threw 2-3 interceptions as a starter. I mean, Trey Lance probably couldn't not throw an interception to save his life. I mean, and by all means, I understand Trey Lance needs to be coached up. He has some time to do that. He can rehab. Once he rehabs, and he can do some better practices. what would be your recommendation to bring Trey Lance up from near failure as a starter last year?
Yeah. Oh, I don't know about that. I mean, he did get hurt, so it's hard to make any judgment. I think join him at the hip with Kyle Shanahan and get him very familiar with the idea of the ball not being in his hand. Just get rid of it. Get it out. You've got guys, if you're reading the defense the way it should be, you're going to have a chance to throw the ball in this offense very, very quickly. And that to me, especially like I said, if he kind of learns to share a brain with Kyle in a lot of ways, that if there was one thing I'd wish for him, that would be it.
I think that when you look at Kyle, and I know he learned a lot from his dad, if not everything from his dad, who's a Hall of Fame coach. A lot of situations, and I know that one situation is not going to be like another, and your decisions based on football field position has everything to do with either calling that play or you don't. If it succeeds, you look like a genius. If it fails, you look like you had your hands tied behind your back and your mouth was glued with duct tape. When Kyle calls plays, what level of confidence, especially if they're in the red zone, or if do you foresee him making any changes to play calling moving forward into the season?
He'll do some things to suit the skill level of Trey when he's in there, but there's still McCaffrey, there's still Kittle, there's still Ayuk, there's still Jennings, there's still Debo. I mean, they're not lacking for talent in that offense. So there's so many things he can take advantage of. And just like you saw in the Super Bowl, and it was really highlighted by Andy Reid's sort of imagination and the way he used motion and the way he used formation, it's just the same kind of stuff that Kyle does. And it wasn't that, Jalen Hurts was just diagnosing and figuring things out. He was put in a scheme where if he has a little patience and reads things correctly, he's going to be able to get the ball out of some really talented players. So that's the other thing I would keep pounding in his brain. He doesn't have to do it. It ain't about him. Look out there and watch McCaffrey run with the ball. Watch him catch the ball. Watch George Kittle run routes and what he can do after he catches it. Watch Debo, what he can do out of the backfield, and the slide, and the Y. I mean, come on, man. it's not that hard to figure out that, you're a great tool. You're a great athlete, but you're there just to kind of augment that talent until you prove otherwise, because he hasn't proven otherwise.
Well, to me, he hasn't proven that he can get it done with the starts that he had. I mean, there were some serious miscues for Trey Lance. I'm not throwing him under the bus by any means. I'm saying he needs a hard lesson, or probably many hard lessons, in order to get to the level that this offense needs for him to be in order to be successful. A student of the game, as you know, 3-time Super Bowl champion. How many times did you find yourself in the classroom after class saying, okay, well, I need to study this a little bit more. I need to understand this play a little bit more. Did you spend more time just sitting there writing down and taking notes and following up and doing your studying? Or did you find yourself more out on the practice field executing what was given to you in theory?
Well, I guess the answer to that properly is yes. You've got to do both, really. And especially if you're a young quarterback, that goes back to the cliche of first one in, last one out. And no one watches more tape. No one studies more game plan. That's just the way it's got to be. That's just the way it's got to be. And, I think you learn the proper way of sort of handling yourself. And again, he's got some pretty sturdy guys to lean on, whether it's Trent or George or whoever. He can get some pretty good class lessons just right in that building without having to go too far out of it.
Well, one thing that I'm with you. I've interviewed plenty of athletes, and all of them say, you know what, I've spent more time in the classroom than I have on the actual field, whether it's in practice or real time, because that enables me to ask a lot of questions you don't get to ask in a formation. You don't get to ask on the sidelines, what was that one play called? What was that number? How did you call that out? No, you learn that in the classroom.
Yeah.
That's why the best student athletes are the ones that do their homework, and the ones that aren't don't.
Yeah. Everybody also, Rudy, I think they learn differently. That's if there's anything I've learned over all these years in sports, is there is no cookie cutter way of doing stuff. You know, if quarterback evaluation and quarterback teaching and quarterback coaching was that easy, well, Brock doesn't last to the last pick of the draft. You know, Montana doesn't last till the third round. Brady doesn't last till the sixth. So I mean, it's a very inexact science, and the only common thing with everybody that's ever been successful, to your point, it's work. It's the time in the time in the weight room, the time on the practice field, the time in the meeting room. Just, I mean, it's some lonely, tedious shit. Right? Just sitting there watching the tape and breaking things down. And my favorite quote from a head coach, and it was after my old college coach who went on to win Super Bowls and Hall of Fame coach, Dick Vermeil. He insisted you never saw a tape until you saw it at least 6 times. And I remember the first time he said that, I kind of went, wow, how many times have I done that? It's like, but you know, that's the time. That's the nature of the beast. And for coaches and quarterbacks and guys like that, you know, just fat guys up front, we don't have to watch 6 games. We don't watch tape 6 times.
Well, 6 times or not, at some point that's going to soak in. I mean, if Dick Vermeil knows anything, and also a guy from California, it would be to watch it again and again and again until you absorb it. And again, you stated that everybody learns differently. Everybody understands differently at a different level, different plateau. Speaking of remembering, you mentioned Dick Vermeil. I have a Twitter question about Bubba Parrish. Is that someone you had played with? Because he went to DeSales High School.
Yeah, Bubba Parrish was our left tackle on my last Super Bowl in Super Bowl 23. He got there, I believe he was drafted in 85 or 86. It was, I mean, it was a tough deal for him. He got there after our second Super Bowl. He was a first-round draft pick. He started, and he blew his knee out in our last preseason game, his rookie year. But he had a hell of a career. He had a real love-hate relationship with our offensive line coach and having to stand on a scale. But outside of that, he was a really, really good offensive tackle. And during his era, probably one of the best at it.
Well, that was a great answer to a very short question. I appreciate that. Thank you. And I'm sure the person who asked that question will appreciate that as well. When you think about your career, and I know you've probably been asked this or maybe in a conversation about another player, did you leave it all on the field? Every asset, every tool, every mental mistake? Were you able to just leave everything out on the field on your very last game?
Well, I was lucky. Yeah, my last game was Super Bowl. And I was also lucky they had guys like Montana and Rice and John Taylor and Roger Craig and people like that playing with me on our offense. But yeah, I mean that's kind of the way you dream going out. And I was a big reader when I was a kid. I used to read a lot of sports books about all the great players. And I had it stuck in my head that I wasn't going to play until I was used up. I wasn't going to play until I couldn't do it anymore. And, you know, after having been in San Francisco for, 12, 13 years, I wasn't going to play like somewhere else for 5 years, just because I was hanging on. So that was my whole idea. So yeah, I went out to me the perfect way.
I think you did as well. But what do you say for those guys that didn't? You mentioned Brett Favre earlier, decided to leave Green Bay, retired, and then unretired. Tom Brady, same thing. He retired
Mhm.
and came back and unretired just to play with the Bucks all over again. Is there that
Yeah.
itch that
Oh
comes
yeah.
out?
Oh yeah. And it was there. I mean, I retired after Super Bowl 23. I took a job with CBS. I did a full schedule of games. Did really well. I was actually working with the NFL Today during the playoffs in '89, and I'm on the sideline doing a report during warmups of the divisional playoff game at Candlestick. And I'm watching them warming up, and I'm looking over at I think they were playing the Vikings. I'm looking at the Vikings, I'm looking at the Niners, and my producer was with me, and I'm shaking my head, and he goes, "What's wrong? Is there something wrong?" I said, "Shit, they're going to do it again. I should have stayed around. I could get another Super Bowl ring." So yeah, I mean, but yeah, it's one of those things. It just if you live by your regrets, you're gonna have a pretty miserable life.
That is for sure. But what can you say for those guys that decided to unretire and not be nowhere near as successful as
Yeah.
they were before?
Well, they're probably a lot richer. I can tell you the money play I think plays a huge role in why some guys just keep on going because the money was light years different even at the end of my career. I mean, I made about 600 grand my last year, my 13th season, and I think I was the third or fourth highest paid lineman in the league. So yeah, it's changed a lot. If I was making $25 million a year, I might hang on for a couple of years. Yeah.
So with that, when did you feel that you were done? You had no more in you. There was nothing left, or Randy Cross.
I knew I had something left. In fact, when I told Bob McKittrick I was going to announce my retirement, he tried to quickly, because I was leaving the room to go to a press conference. He was doing his damnedest to get me not to do it. He kept telling me, "You can play another 3 or 4 years. You got to stick around." But that's the one thing about sports that's different than the corporate life or being an entrepreneur or anything else. At least I think it is. When you watch the tape, if you still see the guy that you recognize for all your career, then stay and keep doing it. And if you're being honest with yourself and you look at that tape and that's not what you sort of want to put out there, then maybe it's time not to play. And that was kind of where I was at. I was still playing at a good level, really good level. I mean, I was second team All NFC my last year. I was still playing pretty good. It wasn't what I had expected. I had a little injury the year before. I had torn an MCL, so I had to go back into center my last year and a half. But no, it was time to go. The eyes don't lie when you watch that tape.
Yeah, I think that's one of the reasons why Tom Brady decided to call it a day. But his situation obviously is different, just like everyone else's. He battled a divorce. He was, on a losing end of an otherwise decent season. A lot of mixing and matching on that offensive line. Weapons offensively weren't the same. He wasn't throwing them with crispness, with velocity, with accuracy. So the Tom Brady version that I saw, in my opinion, from 2021 through 2022 were completely different.
Yeah,
Completely
yeah,
different.
it happens. It does, and the position we see it the most, or at least the starkest difference, is at running back, because running backs don't slowly fall off; they step off a cliff, and it's just they're different. They you see them, they're not as quick, they're not as fast, they don't hit the hole as hard, they don't run as powerfully, and it's time to move along. It's time to move along. But yeah, it's quarterback's a position where you can probably play those extra years, and you can do that. because especially guys that are smart and can make up for some of those flaws with that savvy they learn, through the first 15, 20 years of their career. Plus,
Right.
nobody can hit it. Plus, nobody can hit them anymore.
That's true, unless you have 5 kids and they're pile driving you and, daddy's made of steel. They're climbing all over you, trying to take you down on the ground,
That's right.
could be different. Could be one of the reasons why Tom Brady went back. He figured he'd rather be chased by 350-pound linemen than, his kids chasing him everywhere, running him down. I don't know. I don't have that many kids, but that's the last thing I'd want to contend with. I'll tell you that right now.
Yeah.
Today's show brought to you by @TrophyCase. Go to trophycase.app. You got to be in it to win it. If you want a trophy in your case, go to trophycase.app. And of course, Saturdays Count. Go to SaturdaysCount.com. Get all your wonderful shirts here. And of course, you can send one to Randy as well. Compliments of me. Go to SaturdaysCount.com. His colors be UCLA colors because that's where he played his college ball.
There you go.
Was it an XXL, Randy, or XL?
Just an XL now.
Just
These
an
days,
XL? Okay.
I'm a little smaller now.
A little smaller now? Okay, well, XL then. If anyone wants to send Randy a shirt, or me for that matter, just go to SaturdaysCount.com. Make sure you order yourself a shirt of any team you follow, whether you've been there, alma mater, or just a fan of the team. SaturdaysCount.com. Randy, it's been fantastic. Thank you so much for your time. I know the time differential, you're 3 hours ahead in Georgia. So I appreciate your time nonetheless, and thank you for it.
No problem. My pleasure. Anytime.
We'll definitely talk soon.
All right.
Thank you so much. Take care. Have a good night.
All right, talk to you later. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye. Well, that was Randy Cross, man. Talk about a conversation. I could have gone hours talking to Randy. He's just so easy to talk to, and the topics and the conversations, things that NFL teams will need. We're going to talk about that in the next show tomorrow, right here on TheRudeDogShow.com. Subscribe to my YouTube channel. I know I may have neglected it here and there, but go to the Rude Dog Show on YouTube. Throw me a subscription button if you like that content. Go to TheRudeDogShow.com. You can send me a follow request on Twitter @RudeDogReyes. And of course, you can find me anywhere: Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, you name it, I'm on it. Again, thank you everyone for tuning in. This is Rudy Reyes on the RudeDogShow.com, and we will see you guys tomorrow. Thanks for tuning in.